It's called Step Into the Spotlight, right here. And we're going green. I'm taking a page from Heidi. We're going green. I'm not going to have handouts every time I do a presentation. But the 7 steps to stardom that Sufit talks about are: develop your persona, define your role. Probably the most important piece of the puzzle is figure out what you want to be and what you're trying to sell. Are you going to sell the sizzle? Or are you selling the steak? Are you selling therapy? How many people do you know want to go and spend their hard-earned money for therapy? Not a whole lot. But if I'm selling improved relationships, better, calm, loving atmosphere in the family, so you want to really spend some time defining what your persona is, what your role is, and what you're selling. You might even have somebody help you brainstorm about different aspects of your role, your personality, whatever the product is you're selling, because the more clear you are about it, the better you're going to be able to communicate it to others. And then she says, dig for your story and add some color. She also says then, connect your story to what you're selling. One of the best keynote speakers in the history of America was very fond of telling people, make it about stories. Tell stories. Put your message in a story, because the story is all people remember. Bill was his name, and Bill had a protege, Steve. And Steve was a professional tennis player, and Steve, he had content. He was going to tell people about mental toughness. He had a 37-step process. If you get through this, you're mentally tough, you get more done. And his mentor said, not so much, you got to make it about stories. No, but I'm a content speaker, he'd say. I'm a content speaker. And Bill would say, well, how much you make in a speech there in that content speaking realm? He said, oh, about 500. And Bill said, so what do you want to make? He said, oh, more, a lot more. I want to make what you make. And he said, well, then you got to have a different system. So Steve tells the story about walking through the airport with Bill. And on a regular basis, they would get recognized. And a gentleman, an older gentleman, came up to Bill and Steve, and he said, oh, are you Bill Gove? And Bill said what he always said, yes, and thank you for remembering me. And then the gentleman said, I saw you speak in 1963 back in Bartlett, Ohio at the hotel, and I just got to know, are you still telling that piano story? And Bill looks over at Steve and says, what am I telling you? And he says, let me ask you something. He didn't answer the question. He asked him, do you remember what the point of that story was? And the man stopped and he thought, and he said, no, but I love that story. I've told that story so many times. I love that story about the piano. And Bill would say, well, thank you for remembering me and have a great day. And they'd walk away. And he says to Steve, what am I telling you? It's about the story. Telling stories, it's what grabs people. The handouts, the list of to-dos, the 37-step process to mental toughness, not so much. So if you have something that's critically important that you want people to remember, get a story. Practice the story, animate it, add some color to it, they'll remember. Figure out what you're going to say and how to say it. Access your inner chutzpah. She tells a story of a guy who wrote a book, and he had it published, and he went to one of these publishing outfits where they bring in all kinds of people like him to be at the seminar, and it's a book signing fair, it's a festival. And he showed up, and he paid his money, and they put him in this large room with all these other people who had their books. And there were all kinds of people walking through the room, and he noticed this, but then he said, you know, I noticed they're not staying in this room, they're walking through the room. So he went and followed where they were walking to, and of course they went to a smaller room where there was a dais of about 8 chairs and a table, and that's where the famous speakers were sitting. And he stood there for a minute and he watched what was going on, all these people, and he noticed there was an empty chair in the dais. And he thought, and then he acted, and he went and got all his books and stuff, and he walked right in like he knew what he was doing. He set up and he plopped himself down in that empty chair. He sold a lot of books that day. People heard him talk, they liked him, they gathered around him. The next year, that book fair invited him back, and he sold the most of anybody at the fair. He never would have gotten the opportunity if he hadn't taken the chance. You gotta have the guts to act. 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs won't ask for it. 9 out of 10 people in this room who are several notches above the average individual who just goes to work for somebody else, 9 out of 10 of us won't do what Marlon did. Ask for the advertising. If you're going to give a presentation next month, call a newspaper in that area. Tell them you're coming into town, tell them what your story is, tell them the benefit to the audience. Let them decide whether or not it's a good thing to fill up their front page with. Front page of the local paper. Start collecting names. These days it's email addresses. It used to be addresses or phone numbers. That's your leverage. Unless you're a celebrity already, this is what people want. They want to know that you've got 50,000 or 150,000 on your mailing list. They want to know that you've already got people that want to hear what you have to say. They want to read your book, they want to read your newsletter, they want to show up at your classes. You have to have a thick skin. You're not going to succeed out of the box, right off the bat. So, yeah, or even after a while. Sufit says, pick up a book like Great Failures of the Extremely Successful, Steve Young. Or Harvey Mackay's We Got Fired, and it was the best thing that ever happened to us. She points out that Elvis was let go from the Grand Ole Opry after one performance and told, you better go get a job driving a truck, son, you're not going to make it in this business. She points out that in 1889, the San Francisco Examiner sent a letter to Rudyard Kipling. He authored a little book you might have heard about, Jungle Book. The letter said, quote, I'm sorry, Mr. Kipling, but you just do not know how to use the English language. She points out that Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind was submitted to 25 different publishers. The most common comment was, people just don't want to read Civil War stories. If you're not in the right business, you can't have a passion for what you're doing. If you don't have a passion for what you're doing, people don't want to hear you talk. They don't want to read your book. They don't want to sit in your class. How can you figure out what you've got a passion for? Make a list of 10 things that you're just really good at. Then make a list of 10 things you just love to do. I don't care if you can make any money at them or not. Most of us have difficulty coming up with those 10 things in both of those categories. But do it, it'll pay dividends in spades. Then think about what would make your world a better place. Your idea of how the world could be if it's perfect or much better than it is today. And then figure out what you can use that you're already good at, naturally good at, to do some things that you'd really like to do in order to help the world be a better place. Even if it's just your immediate world, your friends, your family, your community. Her coworker from that office came to see Sufit do one of her comedy clubs or stand-up routines, and afterwards she came to her and said, Sufit, I cannot believe that you're the person I'm sharing that office with. She said, you were so alive up there. You had that audience eating out of your hands. You're in the wrong business. And it made her wake up and say, well, maybe I am. If you're not in the right business, if it doesn't light a fire under you, it's going to be very difficult for you to light a fire in other people. To have them capture their passion, to have them pursue the use of their skills in a way that's going to make their life better and the lives better of the people around them. Fun sells. People want to be around people that are having fun. People want to be around people that are enjoying their topic. Everybody thinks about what they want to do for a living. As a matter of fact, lots of adults ask children, what do you want to do when you grow up? And Paula Poundstone says the reason for that is the adults are still looking for good ideas. Well, if you're out there looking for good ideas, pick up a book like this, Sufit's Step into the Spotlight. Take some time to define what your role is, what your message is, and use some of the techniques in here to step into the spotlight, to get yourself noticed, to spread your message because we need it. You're here for a reason. We need your individual talents. We need your passion to make this world a better place.